Welcome to this episode. Today I'll be doing a full walkthrough of my track Don't Let the Sun Go Down, released back in February on Morph Records. In this episode, I'll cover how to use selective panning to add width to your tracks, how to make a great guitar sound using only a built-in mic, how to process female vocals, how to layer supersaws effectively to get a really full sound, and how to arrange melodies and tracks to be catchy and fresh without getting too repetitive. Before we dive in, I want to thank each and every one of you for watching and everyone who has listened to and supported my song. The response to this song has really blown me away, and I'm honored to have heard so many stories about how Don't Let the Sun Go Down has spoken to people and resonated with them. Thank you all so much. I'm also happy to announce that I will be giving away a mini pack of 5 awesome Serum presets that I use to make this song. All you have to do to get the pack is subscribe to this channel and then click on the link in the description below to unlock the download. Alright, let's dive in.
Don't let the sun go down. Don't let the sun go down.
So right away in the intro, we have kind of some pads and guitars happening here. I'll solo it for you. Okay, so that's pretty much the intro. It kind of dives right into the instrumental for the most part. We have this nice vinyl crackle happening. It just, as you can hear it, it adds this really nice like texture on top. It makes the track feel a little bit warmer, a little bit more intimate. Kind of has a lo-fi, vintage quality to it that I really liked for this song. And so I layered that within these atmospheres. These are from an Eon pack, and I really love these. So there's 2 different ones. You can see this one pan to the right more. This one's pan to the left more. But thrown together, it adds a lot of spaciousness and depth to the track, having 2 different things happening in the left channel and the right channel. And then I also threw a simple sample delay on both of them to make them extra wide. All this is doing down here is delaying the right channel more than the left, so it's kind of adding that stereo separation. So that's pretty straightforward. And then the main stuff that's happening in this section come from these pianos and pads that are slowly fading in. I'll show you these. So that was just simple gain automation, going from 0 up to, or from negative infinity up to 0. On this piano patch, I really love this plugin, Alicia's Keys. It's a beautiful plugin used by, producers like Set the Sky and Illenium and all, the big guys who make these killer tracks. It's a beautiful plugin, and I would say it's well worth the $100. It's my go-to piano for sure. And then I just made it a little bit wider with another sample delay. And then I threw a ping pong delay on here. I guess it's not technically ping pong, but the left and the right channels are delayed by different amounts. But that adds a really cool effect. You can see if I turn it off. Like, it's fine, but it's just kind of like, I don't know, it feels kind of more robotic, a little bit more, I don't know, it's just a little colder. But then when you add this, it just adds this like, it really just adds this nice like spatial element to the track, like filling out these spaces in between where the notes are hitting. And I really liked the way that sounded. And then I threw some reverb on here. I love Valhalla Vintage Verb, huge fan. Simple plate reverb. We got a little bit of OTT on here, brighten things up. And then a tiny bit of sidechain. This comes in when the drums are playing. It's actually a fair amount of sidechain, like -20. Make some room for the drums. the utility for the gain, and then just some EQ. Sometimes the high end on pianos can sound a little bit weird, especially when you have it layered with pads. So I just decided to take that out here. And then I love doing this with a lot of my songs. So I took that same piano, I bounced it out to audio, and then I split it at each of these like different chords that it's playing and reversed them all so that it kind of has this effect of like fading into itself. Here's what that sounds like. And with that ping pong delay, that adds some extra like movement that's really nice. And layered together, it really makes the piano more dynamic, have a lot more movement. And then I just layered it with a simple pad. So as you can see, this has all the same processing on here. I don't have the patch because I stemmed this out to audio, but it's a simple saw wave, with maybe like 7 or 9 voices. And then I just duplicated the wavetable, panned one hard left, panned one hard right, and detuned them differently so that you have different stuff happening in the different channels. And that just makes the pad really nice and wide. It's a really good way to do that. So that's the pads, and then here's kind of the meat and potatoes, so to speak, of this track, or at least of the verse, is this guitar. So my good friend Nick recorded this. He's a great guitar player. And I was visiting him back in January or something, and we were talking about this song and bouncing ideas off each other, and we didn't really have any good recording equipment because we were down at his place, and I didn't have any of my my microphone or anything. So we ended up literally just miking up his acoustic guitar with the built-in mic in my laptop. That's all we did. And, it came out really pretty nice. We had to do quite a bit of processing to it, but it came out nice. And I think that just shows you, like, if anybody tries to tell you that you have to have some insane, some really expensive, audio recording equipment to put guitar or record anything else, I guess, for your songs. If people try to tell you that you have to have the $800 microphone or, the $2,000 audio interface, like, I'm sorry, but like, they're lying, because you can record some pretty cool riffs with literally a built-in microphone on a laptop, and that's what we did here. So I'll take off all of the processing. I don't know if there's a faster way to do this. If someone knows a faster way to just like turn off all these plugins at the same time, please let me know in the comments, because I've been trying to figure that out. But let's take that off. So here's what it sounds like without the processing. So it was a pretty decent recording, especially considering that it was with a built-in microphone. But there's a little bit of noise in there, a little bit of graininess. So we tried to kind of clean up some of that with the processing. So first what I did is I added another sample delay on here. This just makes it nice and wide. And then I actually threw Vocal Writer on here. I don't think this is really how you're supposed to use this plugin, but it's fine. So it's designed by Waves with the purpose of basically doing automated gain automation. It said automated twice. Regardless, it's basically doing gain automation on the vocal so that it kind of keeps the vocal at a certain relative level. So you set your target up here. And you can see the yellow bar is like the volume of the track, right? So I set the target, and then you can see the fader is moving up and down in response to the volume of the track, just pulling that up or down until it relatively meets that target that you set. So it's just a really clean way of doing some gain automation without having to like manually draw in the automation curves. Love this plugin. So I ended up using that on a guitar I don't know if that's really what you're supposed to do or not, but it worked. It sounded good, and that's ultimately what matters, right? And then I threw some reduced ambience on here to kind of kill some of that noise that's happening in the background from the built-in mic. Reverb. I'll show you that. It's another plate reverb. Really nice on guitars. And then I EQ'd out a little bit more of that noise in the high end. I ended up muting that. Added some OTT, brightened things up a little bit. Saturated it, kind of give it a little bit more analog warmth. You know how most guitars sound, and so that helped a lot. And then this is a great compressor by Waves, just taking the tiny bit of the peaks off, really. With this one, and then a little bit more compression. This nice glue compressor, just a little bit. Sidechain, and then just EQ'd out some of the low end. Kind of pushes it back a little bit more in the mix, which is what I wanted, to make room for the vocal and the pads and things. So that's pretty much all the instruments that are happening in the verse. There's this one electric guitar that comes in later, which I'll play for you. So this kind of has a really like ethereal quality to it. So how I kind of get that sound is I run it through a delay, kind of like you saw earlier, but with more diffusion, and a ping pong delay, to clarify. And then I run it through a lot of reverb, probably like 50 or 60%, and then some OTT, as you can see here. There's a saturator on there for more warmth, and then I just EQ'd out a little bit of the low end and brought up the high end a little bit to kind of brighten it up, and that gives you this really, really nice guitar quality. And then I panned it more to the right. I'm a big fan of panning things slightly off center, and putting things in slightly different places so that, not everything sounds like it's coming from the same place, and it kind of adds a lot of spaciousness to the track. So that's that. Let's see here. We got a simple bass. This is a cool trick that I saw on an In the DAW episode. Shout out DAW Nation. They have awesome videos. Highly recommend watching this. I don't remember which video this came from specifically, but what they did is they take a saw wave, you detune it slightly with two voices, and then you come into the global and you take the width all the way down to 0. And so what that does is it takes these really detuned saw waves and smashes them together in the mono channel, and it has all this like phase cancellation. You can actually see it, like these frequencies are like amplifying or canceling each other out at various times, because the phases are canceling. So it adds a lot of movement to the sub, which is really sweet. And then later I just switched it, when the full verse comes in, I just switched it with a simple steady sine wave that sounds like this. It's a lot more present. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on to the vocals, right? Everyone's favorite part. So here's what the vocal bus sounds like.
Give you my emotions. I just tryna give you all my love. All my love is never enough, but you.
So this is a beautiful vocal by Dyson. And I didn't really have to do that much processing to it because she did a phenomenal job with it. I'll show you what I did though. So on the lead vocal,
give you my emotions.
This one, I threw that same plugin from earlier, Vocal Writer, and I also then sidechained it to the rest of the track so that it actually like listens to the volume of the song. Not only is it doing gain automation, but it listens to the volume of the rest of the instruments and then sets your vocal like volume in proportion to that, so that it's never like getting buried under the other instruments.
Give you my emotions.
So you can see that moving around.
I just tryna give you all my love.
So that's a great plugin. I highly recommend it. A little bit of OTT to brighten up the vocal. saturated it a little bit. I probably could have done a little bit more, but I mean, really, it's such a good vocal already that it didn't need it. This is a great compressor to use with vocals.
Give you my emotions.
And it's actually doing a fair amount of work.
I just trying to give you all my love.
As a nice analog character with these settings down here. Yeah, and then I ended up not really even de-essing it. Yeah, I think the reason I turned the de-esser off is because sometimes, like, yeah, the S is a little bit whistly, but this kind of ends up doing more harm than it does good sometimes, making that S sound more like a T or something, so, or a TH or whatever.
Give you
just some
my
tiny
emotions. I just trying to give you all my love.
Just to control a little bit of that low end, really. So this is another trick that, you know, I probably wouldn't do it the same way now, but this is how I did it back for this song. So a lot of times what I do to try to thicken up vocals is I'll duplicate that main lead vocal, right, that I just showed you. I'll duplicate it a few times, and then I'll pitch or formant shift them like up or down different amounts. So like you can see here, like this one is normal, but like this one is down 5 semitones. I know it's kind of quiet, but that one's down 5. Like this one's up 7. So like you kind of you do that, and then you pan them out differently. So I sent this one that's down 5 hard left, the one that's up 7 hard right, and then there's these other ones that are kind of panned just different amounts up and down, and it makes this cool like chorus effect.
Give you my emotions. I just trying to give you all my love. All my love.
So like that kind of sounds really weird on its own, right? But what it's doing is it's adding all of these different voices essentially in the left and the right channels, and then singing different harmonies or harmonizing pitches, I guess. And then when you layer that with the main vocal,
Give you my emotions. I just trying to give you all my love.
like that's what you end up getting, and it sounds way thicker. Like here's the comparison. There's no chorus now.
Give you my emotions.
I'll add the chorus.
I just trying to give you all my love.
So it's pretty subtle, but like it makes the vocal sound a lot thicker and a lot more full. So that's a really neat trick. And then a way that you can even make it sound more full is by adding like so I took that same vocal, right? Duplicated it again. This time I added a chorus to it, and then I also added this same sample delay that I showed you earlier, with larger amounts this time. And then it's different on the left and different on the right, so it makes the vocal super wide, so it sounds like this. Right, so it's kind of weird, but layered with the vocal.
Fine. Don't let the sun go down.
And then add the
Don't
chorus.
let the sun go down.
That just really fills it out, right? So that's just a neat trick for like when you're working with vocals, just kind of playing around with pitching them at different amounts and panning them in various positions, and it just really thickens up the vocal. So that's pretty much that. The drums are pretty straightforward. I won't go into too much detail here, but here's what these sound like in the verse. So here's the kick. Just a pretty simple kick. That might be from, you know, that's actually probably a combination of a few different kicks. Sounds like a clicky top kick layered with something a little bit more punchy, probably from a Cashmere pack or something. Then we have these snares. That's from a Medicine pack. It's just kind of a trappy like clap. And then I layered that with a wider clap to kind of fill out the stereo field. And then that's layered with this snap to kind of give it some more texture and some more high-end presence. But altogether, it sounds like this. right? So really nice and full. And then I just threw a little bit of reverb on there. Just a little bit. And the way I do the timing on the reverb for snares is I just listen, right? And I try to set the decay so that it, like, the volume of the reverb goes to 0 right as the next snare hit happens. So you can kind of hear that. Right? And so that's like just kind of filling out that full couple beats with that reverb. And then it's just pretty straightforward. I think there's just some cymbals. Yeah. Yep. So these are from probably actually a few different places. I like using a lot of like rock hi-hats and acoustic hi-hats and rides and things because I think that it kind of adds a nice like organic quality, you know, live element to an EDM track that otherwise could be kind of cold and just overly electronic sounding. So it kind of adds a nice like acoustic feel to it. Okay, so let's move on to the breakdown and the build-up. So the only thing that's really changing here are the pads that I'm using. So you have this piano. So it's just two different piano patches playing different notes at different like octaves. But layered together, it's really nice. You know, this one's panned a little bit right, this one's panned a little bit left. I think they have the same processing for the most part on there. Kind of like what you saw earlier with these delays and reverbs and OTT and stuff. You can see I like a lot of the same plugins for my processing. But together it makes this really nice and full piano. And then I just layered that with these two pads here. These are just more of like that detuned saw wave that I showed, or that I talked about earlier, just in different octaves. So these were made in Serum again. Yeah, just a detuned saw wave with actually not that much detuning. I like a cleaner sound for that. And then this is one more little trick that I'll show you. So going into this section, I added some like reverse chords. It sounds like this. So it creates a nice like transition into this section. Here, I'll play the full.
Anywhere, I was angry before.
You can kind of hear it in the background there, right? So all you do for that is you literally just like record the first beat of like all of these pads playing, and then just make it 100% wet with reverb, and then just freeze the reverb tail and reverse it, and that's it. And it creates really nice transitions. Like whenever you're trying to like introduce new instruments, new sounds, highly recommend doing that. It just kind of helps introduce it without it feeling too sudden. And then the last thing I'll show you in this section is the ARP. So this is it's a really simple arpeggio pattern, but what I did, I'll show you right now. I don't have the original patch, but I can pull it up. So I basically, for this one, went into Serum and made this pluck sound. I think it's this one. And I made this pluck sound, and then I ran it through a guitar amp, which you'll see here in a second. And that's why it sounds really kind of warm, analog, and it sounds kind of like a guitar in a way, you know. But it's basically a variation of this like triangle sine wave thing, just made plucky by doing this envelope automation on the cutoff. So all that's happening here is it's just pulling down the filter cutoff after like the note immediately hits. And so then I ran that through Guitar Rig through this high white amp. I also really like the Hot Solo Plus, Twang Reverb's really cool, and Van 51. Those are kind of my go-tos. But that just makes it really nice and warm. And so that's what I did here. Just added some saturation. I also made it wide. And that gives you this sound. And shout out to my friend Gazing Skies for that trick. He's the one who kind of, you know, showed me that idea, and it's super sweet. It's a total game changer. It's another cool thing going into the buildup. So I made kind of a vocal like riser basically by taking the main like down syllable and then just like delaying it. I think this is an 8th note rhythm. And then it just pitched it up as it went. So here's what it sounds like. Yeah, so all that's happening there is, like I said, I delayed the vocal, and then it's getting reverbed out as it's, you know, continuing through the section, and then it's getting pitched up, as you heard. And so then with everything else, it sounds like this. And so then layered with the drums, and then the risers, it has this nice build-up effect. And then here's the drums. So I introduced the build-up drums in this section with some hi-hats. I really like doing this. Otherwise, I feel like it kind of comes in too suddenly, so I added this. Right, and then these are just some like taiko or like orchestra drums, just panned to different sides and hitting at different times, with some hi-hats layered in. And then shakers coming in. So this is a trick I like doing with the shakers. They're from a John Sign pack, and what I did is I take one shaker sample or loop, pan it hard right, take another, pan it hard left, and then you have two different things happening on the sides. Makes it super nice and wide. And then just layered it with these build, snare, and claps. Some impacts. Right? And then you get this. And then the kick comes in.
Don't let the sun go down.
And the last thing that I'll tell you about the build-up before getting to what everyone wants to talk about, the drop, is I do two things. So you can hear in the kick clearly that I basically take the low end out of the entire mix as we're going into the drop, because when the drop hits, the sub comes in and the bass is all there and it sounds really, really full. So here's what this sounds like. See how it's losing that low end? And then the other thing that I do, which you can probably see here, maybe? Okay. Yeah, is gain automation. So like the drop is literally 2.5 dBs louder than the rest of the track. And then once you run it through like the mastering, like that kind of disappears a little bit, but the same difference of like presence and volume kind of stays. So it makes the drop sound really powerful. And here's what the drop sounds like. All right, so let's walk through this. So this drop went through a few different trials. It took a lot of meticulous work getting this right. I think I made and remade this drop like 3 or 4 times to get it right. But here's what we have going on here. So I'll start with the chords. So I have these really full, wide supersaws, right? And the way that you do that is just by strategically layering certain sounds together. So this is kind of the main layer that I did. It's a simple saw wave with a lot of detune and distortion. And it's at a lower octave, right? And so you don't really need the high end then because it's kind of at this lower octave. And so I took a lot of that high end out with the EQ. And then I added this layer, which is some higher saws. So that's kind of filling out like the higher end, right? It's up an octave. And then it's also like panned. So there's two wavetables in that patch. They're just saw waves made in Serum. One is panned hard right and one is panned hard left. Again, making it super wide. But it sounds really clean. So when I'm making layers for a song, right, I'm kind of constantly thinking about, okay, how does this sound right now, and what does it need in order to sound as full as it possibly can? So it sounded really clean to me. And so I was like, okay, it needs more kind of grit, more distortion. It just needs a little bit more heaviness to it. So I added this layer, solo it. Which is pretty much the same patch as the last one. It's just a saw wave in Serum. But the detune is way higher. There's way more distortion on it. And then I also added this layer. So kind of repeating the same trick from earlier. This is a saw wave made in Serum that I ran through a guitar amp. And that's why it sounds super gritty and super distorted. And I just did a little bit of EQ to tame kind of that 3K range. It got a little bit too much, but all together now, it's sounding a lot fuller. You can see how much of a difference that guitar saw kind of makes. It really fills it out and adds a lot of grit. And the last bit here, okay, so these are just two different string patches. One's from Contact, one's kind of a fake string section that I made in Serum. One's panned hard right, one's panned hard left. And then I layered that with some brass, also from Contact, and a choir. I think this is also from Contact. And they're all just panned either hard left, hard right, or just by varying amounts to kind of add this full like orchestral analog element to it. I'm a big fan of layering like organic sounds like that with the, you know, electronic synthesizers. It kind of adds a lot of warmth that you don't get from the synths themselves. The last couple things here. It's kind of just a drone. I think it's a square wave with a lot of reverb on it that's holding out the same pitch of the relative minor for the whole time, kind of just like gluing it all into the same key. And then the last thing I'll talk about is this white noise on top. So this is literally just some bright white noise in Serum that I made super wide and took out all the low end on. And what I did is in all of these tracks, you can see that I took out the super highs, right? Because the thing is when you get to this range, like in the 10K plus range, you're not really hearing pitch anymore. It's just kind of like sound up there, just noise. And so I took all of that out and just added this really pure, clean white noise at the top so that you don't get this kind of like phasey high end. And that's a great trick for kind of having clean highs that don't get all weirdly distorted. So that's that. And then here's the basses. So there's a lot of grit here. So that's coming from this layer. This is a Serum patch. I also use this as one of my leads too, so I'll show you the actual patch in a second. But I just kind of had to take out a lot of the high end because it's too gritty. This patch is from Massive. It has a kind of a more voxy sound, and then this is a simple saw wave in Serum. One saw wave, very mono. So these are kind of doing different things. They have different tonalities. They're wider or narrower, so they're kind of doing complementing each other is what I'm trying to say. And then for the sub, I have a very simple sub patch. I can show it to you. It's literally 2 sine waves, one's pitched up an octave and then saturated to kind of give it a little bit more mids. But I really like a clean low end from just a simple sine wave, so you're not getting all this weird harmonics and stuff. So that's that. And it's kind of just like rounded to a square a little bit to kind of saturate it. It's basically a form of digital clipping that's happening here. It's just compressing the sine wave and adding some more harmonics up top, but not too much. I'm trying to keep it clean. All right, so let's talk about the leads. These are probably everyone's favorite part. So here's what they sound like. So it's kind of a sweet, really catchy, repetitive melody. So I'm literally, oops, sorry, that was probably really loud. I'm repeating the same rhythm over and over and over again, but it's kind of emphasizing like the catchiness of the rhythm of the melody, right? By repeating it, it's getting it stuck in your head. Just varying up the notes very slightly as the chords are changing to kind of keep it interesting, keep it fresh, and evolving throughout the whole progression. I have a bunch of different layers here. Let me get out of that. Okay. I have a bunch of different layers here. Here's the main one. I love this patch. Super simple saw wave with the basic shapes. I just added some bend plus or minus to it. Also some vibrato to give it some movement. But then the trick here comes from the layers. So there's a lower lead playing down an octave. Here we go. This is the patch that I used for that really gritty bass that I was talking about. This is the same patch. It works as a bass or a lead. So there's kind of a lot of post-processing. Some interesting shapes here. I don't remember. Oh yeah, this came from a remap. Okay, yeah. So this is like, oh, okay, so this is simply like a saw wave with the sync up, but then I just remapped it with this curve to kind of give it this like interesting grit to it. Oh geez, sorry. I don't remember where this is just yeah, the Distwa Tech thing also remapped. There's the curve. But yeah, so that kind of adds like a lower octave to it. And I took out a little bit of the lows because it was too present, and then took out some of the highs. I added this high lead. So this is up an octave, and then here's what I'm talking about with these really detuned saws that are panned. One's hard left, one's hard right, and then widened up and thickened up with some multiband compression and distortion. But the secret here to these really full leads is having things playing in different octaves, things panned differently. Again, I'm repeating a lot of the same ideas, but this is kind of like the key to making really thick layers, right? And then I layered that with this guitar lead. So I took that same main lead, right, that I showed you first. I ran it through Guitar Rig, through this Hot Solo Plus amp that makes it super gritty. I added some bit crusher, a lot of erosion, a little bit of erosion, a lot of bit crusher, and then some saturation. And that made it super gritty. Without it, it's going to be really quiet, but... like, I don't even know if you can hear that, but it's really clean, right? And then this just adds all the grit. And then I widened it up with some dimension expander. Okay. EQ'd out a little bit of the high end. Added this brass layer from Contact. So here's what the patch looks like. It's a sweet sound to begin with, but then when you add, or here's without the processing. it's really bright, right? And so I kind of wanted to play into that, add some reverb. And then the saturation kind of warms it up to kind of help counteract the brightness, and then the OTT just kind of like thickens up the whole sound together, and you get the full leads. And then I added some white noise with a sharp attack, just to really emphasize the transient of the lead. So that's a trick that Kashmir talks about in a lot of his songs, is it adding this white noise, like transient, plucky sound that just really emphasizes those hits, and adds a lot of sharpness to your leads. That's a sweet trick. Okay. And then I have an ARP. This is a lot of the same layers, so like I'm not going to go into each individual patch necessarily. It's a lot of the same layers, but just playing this ARP. The one thing I'll talk about here is I layered it with this super EDM sounding vocal chop, guitar, another guitar. And when I'm saying guitar here, I'm not meaning like an actual guitar. I'm again meaning like a serum patch that I ran through Guitar Rig to make it sound like a guitar. But adding those like elements makes this sound a lot more full. It just adds a lot of presence and warmth to it. So that's that. That's the drop pretty much. And then the drums, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Really heavy hitting kick. I think this is a variation of the kick that I used in Memories. Yeah. It's like I took the kick from Memories and then layered it with another kick from Vulnerable, I think, actually. And then I like EQ'd them a little bit so that they fit together and compress them together. And I got that sound. It's a really heavy hitting kick. And then the claps are sounding like this. So I took the same claps from earlier, but this time I layered it with a dubstep snare to make it really hit hard. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Let's see here. And then this is another thing that I like to do is add reverse kicks and reverse claps. So what I'll literally do is take like an acoustic rock kick, or just take even like a clap or a snare and just reverse it. So that it kind of fades into these hits. So like, that's what that reverse kick sounds like, but layered with the snares, you get this cool effect. And then the reverse claps are doing it on the alternating beats. So it kind of fades into the snare, adds a lot of movement, just really dynamic. I repeated a lot of the same percussion from earlier. Kind of, you know, keeping with that consistent theme, and then just some basic, like, here's like a Foley thing. Just some ear candy, and it's super wide. Just like the little details, you know, that kind of add a little something to the track, and you don't necessarily notice it while you're listening to the full thing, but if it's not there, you can kind of tell. And then just have some different rides happening. Kind of varying it up to keep things interesting and keep things moving. Some basic hi-hat stuff too. I really love this open hi-hat. I love open hi-hats so much. That's from a Nicky Romero pack, and it just creates this cool effect. You can kind of hear it. It's like kind of sucking into the next beat, creating a lot of movement. So that's pretty much the drop, really. And then it just goes into this section where we repeat a lot of the same stuff from earlier, like this piano, and then the guitar that comes in. But I just added these like plucky chords. This is just a saw wave again. Again, doing that envelope automation with the filter and serum. That's really it. And so then it's just like layered with the drums that are hitting on 4 on the floor. And then you just have the vocal coming in on top. Yeah, and then the processing that's making these synthesizers like really nice and full is this fat rack here, which I'll show to you. It's basically just a bunch of saturators and compressors layered together. So like without this processing, it's gonna sound way different. Hold on, let me just show you everything first. Yeah, there's a little bit of reduced ambience and stuff. Okay, there's the full. Can't see where I'm clicking. There we go. See, like, it just sounds really weak. But all together, it really brightens and warms things up. So simple, really light saturation, a little bit of dynamic tube to make it sound more analog, a tiny bit of this driver plugin, which adds some distortion. More saturation, OTT, boosting the highs a little bit, cutting the lows a little bit, and then overdrive to really add a lot of grit. So that plugin's really doing a lot. Reduced ambience is just kind of taking care of like the OTT is basically bringing like the reverb and stuff up in volume a lot because it's a two-way compressor, so it has upward compression. That pulls like the really quiet reverb tails up. This reduced ambience is kind of counteracting that a little bit and suppressing that sound. I ran it through a glue compressor, doing just a little bit, and then just some more OTT on top, and that's the fat rack. So that's kind of my secret, I guess, to getting really like taking already nice like layered synths together and just like making it super full and powerful. And then the last thing that I had to do in this section is because you have this like section where there's a lot of synthesizers, a lot of drums, and the vocal all playing at the same time, right? So I added this plugin called Track Spacer to the synth bus to kind of make room for the vocal. So basically what you're seeing that's happening here is this plugin is listening to the vocal. It's showing you the frequency spectrum of the vocal, right? And then it's EQing out space in the synthesizers, right, perfectly contoured to the frequencies that the vocal is playing. And so it's literally just making space for it. And you can see if I turn the ratio all the way up, you'll really hear it. See how it's EQing all of that space out for the vocal? That's a sweet plugin. And then you can also make it so it's affecting like the mid channel more than the sides, which is important because the vocal's mainly in the mids. And then it repeats a lot of the same elements in the second breakdown, just without the filters. Really the only thing that's different is in the second drop. And the only thing that's different is literally the melody. All of the leads are the same. The only thing that changes is the melody. You can see here, it's just different. Repetitive again, but varied up enough to keep it interesting. And the reason for this is that I created 2 different drops when I was making this song, remaking this song. And I liked both of them, and I felt like they were cohesive enough that I could just keep both of them in the track and just separated. But keep them both in there, especially because, you know, the song's repeating the same vocal hook. It's repeating a lot of the same sounds and elements. So I was like, okay, if we change the melody in the second drop, but keep it sounding consistent with the vibe of the first drop, I think it's going to really have this nice fresh drop for the second half. So I ended up going with that. And that's really it. I mean, if there's things that you want me to go into more detail on, feel free to ask in the comments. Total open book here. Here's my entire project file. So, if you have questions, anything, feel free to let me know in the comments below. So that completes this episode. To sum up, I covered the importance of panning to create stereo width. I showed you how to create sweet guitar sounds with no equipment, how to process vocals, how to make epic and full supersaws using proper layering, and how to better arrange your tracks and melodies. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. I'm happy to answer any questions in the comments down below and go into more detail. I will be making more of these videos, so make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to stay updated on future content. And don't forget that the mini pack of 5 Serum presets is available in the description down below. It's super easy to get. All you have to do is subscribe and then click the download link, and that's it. So thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.
Don't let the sun go down.